Welcome to the Outthinkers podcast. Plug into fascinating minds and breakthrough ideas that are transforming industries and the world. I'm your host, Kyan Krippendorf, founder of Outthinker, a global think tank comprised of corporate strategists and innovators that are shaping the future of business. If this describes you, join us at outthinker.com. Now, let's dive into this week's episode with Adam Brotman.
To be an AI-first CEO isn't to become an AI expert. It's to have your own aha moment, to have your own instinct that this technology, this alien intelligence, if you will, is so interesting and fast-moving and pervasive that if you don't use it, you're going to be competitively disadvantaged. And similarly, the faster you can get on it, you can actually create an advantage for yourself. And if you have that instinct and then deliver a mandate to the company to get after it, you could sit back a little bit as a CEO after you. And by the way, you have to have your aha moment. It has to be authentic. You do need to sort of, if you're a CEO, get a boot camp from Forum 3 or something like that, so that, spend a few hours really understanding the power of this. But then go ask your team to go push it forward. And that's what an AI first CEO does.
Where is AI headed? What if we could combine the views on that question with first-hand interviews from the leaders of the field, including Sam Altman, Bill Gates, Reid Hoffman, Ethan Mollick, and others? Well, our guest on today's podcast, Adam Brotman, has done exactly that for us. Adam Brotman is the co-author of the new book, AI First, the Playbook for a Future-Proof Business and Brand, a timely guide to what it really means for leaders and organizations to embrace the next era of transformation. You may know Adam from his work as Starbucks' Chief Digital Officer, where he helped create one of the most admired digital customer experiences in the world. He then went on to become the co-CEO of J.Crew. Now he's applying that same visionary instinct to AI, opening a playbook for leaders who want to move beyond experimentation and put this technology at the very center of how they operate. Adam takes us inside pivotal moments from Bill Gates' insight that AI is so much more than just a productivity tool, Gates' meeting with Altman leading to the Microsoft OpenAI partnership, to the boardroom debates where CEOs wrestle with ROI and risk. He explains why this middle era of AI, as he calls it, can feel messy, yet it's unavoidable. And what separates companies that merely experiment from those that truly transform. He lays that out for us. Together, we dig into the mindset of an AI-first leader, the practical pathways to move beyond hype, and why the future is not about replacing people, but by elevating their impact. If you're wondering what it takes to not just survive, but to thrive in this new era, stay tuned. This episode will leave you with practical insights, a fresh perspective, and perhaps even the aha moment you need to chart your own AI-first path. Let's dive in with Adam Brotman.
Adam, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I know that you're very busy, especially with the launch of your new book, and you are talking to lots of people about it. And there's a lot of demand for it. So we really appreciate you taking some time to sit down and talk to us about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on.
Where are you speaking to us from right now?
I'm actually in California. I'm in Santa Barbara, California.
Oh, gotcha. Great. Looks beautiful. I'm going to start with the same two questions that I ask all of our guests. The first one may have nothing at all to do with your work. If you could just complete the sentence for me. If you know me, you know that.
If you know me, you definitely would know that I have a 8-year-old daughter that is everything to me and dominates most of my thoughts. And secondly, if you know me, you know that I'm a rabid sports fan, especially Seattle sports, which is where I was born and raised.
Nice. And I was in Seattle fairly recently, and it seems that it is a sports fanatic town. Every third person I talked to just talked about, when are we getting a basketball team?
Yeah.
It's the only thing that's missing.
I went to many Sonic games in my life. And it's interesting because my generation, many of the Seattle sports teams actually first started when I was like 8 years old, like in 1977. So like I literally went to the first home Seahawk game that there ever was, and same with the Mariners, and the current instantiation of the Sounders, in fact, the previous instantiation.
Sounders is hockey, is that right?
Sounders is actually soccer.
Soccer, yes, that's right.
They now have a Kraken hockey team, which is
new.
You
guys destroyed Miami recently.
Yeah, but I'm my beloved Seahawks lost the season opener to the 49ers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm big into sports, particularly Seattle sports. But as my daughter will say, and she's right, she's number one over sports.
Good.
It's hard to do that with me, but she managed to do that.
Good. Well, you're there at the beginning of her as well. I'm sure you'll be as attached to her as you are to sports. Awesome. We don't have a lot of time with you. Your book is awesome. We're going to encourage people to read the book. You've got great other content out there. So I'm going to kind of dive in and jump into a few things rather than ask you to kind of go chapter by chapter, the story of the first meeting and the second meeting. And so I'm just going to jump around to there are a few like specific questions that I'd love your thoughts on, if that's okay. All right.
Yeah, fire away.
Just to kind of bring listeners up to speed. Let's talk about the beginning of this book. And I know you first met with Sam Altman, but let's talk about your first meeting with Bill Gates. And, he's someone, as you've said, who has seen and been part of at least two major technological transformations from internet, mobile. And here he is looking at AI. What was his interpretation of how AI compares to other technological shifts like that?
Well, the amazing thing about talking to Bill Gates about this technology is that he has this unique perspective of, is this as big of a deal as graphical user interfaces were? Because, he basically was wowed by Xerox PARC and seeing GUI for the first time I think it was like the late 70s, I think, and built much of Microsoft's strategy around how a graphical user interface operating system would revolutionize the PC vision he had for a PC on every desk. And of course, that all happened and changed the world and whatnot. And he compared looking at what's happening with generative AI to that and said that this is a bigger deal. And which, we went through this whole book process. We were just looking to get perspective from the leaders that were either building the technology or were influential in the technology. And Bill was actually both, because he had a role to play. I don't know if many people know this. He had a role to play in OpenAI and some of the work that they were doing early on around ChatGPT. And they came to him and asked him what they thought about the work on LLMs. And he was very encouraging of it. And frankly, ultimately led to pushing them to create these LLMs that would eventually have the ability to ace a biology exam. And it was one of the milestones that he brought up with us. And it's kind of a famous story now. And he was so blown away by the fact that it could do that, because everything Bill had worked on in his career, which means everything that had come up until this Gen AI breakthroughs that we've seen in the last few years, software was deterministic. Software was, you wrote it and it either worked or it didn't work. Now you've got this generative probabilistic neural network software that's meant to emulate the human brain in many ways. And he couldn't believe that we had sort of cracked the code on that on some level. I mean, we're not all the way there yet, but that was pretty significant for him. And that's how he put it in perspective.
And I love what came out of your conversation with him. What if you could just unpack this for us? Probably every technology has been involved has been about productivity, producing the same in less time or producing more in the same time. But he said this is different. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, he found it interesting that because this was more like a human brain or intelligence as a service, as opposed to traditional deterministic software, he found that it would actually help with the quality of your work. Just like a really smart advisor or consultant would help with the quality of your decision making. That's very unusual for software, right? Software usually helps you with crunching numbers and being more productive, as you just said. The fact that this could help you with qualitative improvements, he would talk about that as a dimension of productivity that most people don't think about, which is that if if a newspaper, for example, they can only produce so many newspapers and so many articles in a given day. And if they could actually get help with a qualitative uplift of their articles, that would be also valuable to them. In fact, maybe even more valuable, because unlike other businesses, some businesses, the quality matters more than quantity. And we had a whole conversation with him in our interview with him around AI. That dimensionality of qualitative, not just quantitative uplift, was really eye-opening, because now when I describe why businesses should transform using Gen AI, I often say it's about making better decisions faster. And yes, it's also about producing more output for less costs, et cetera. But to me, the biggest thing that Gen AI does for a business leader is allow you to make better decisions faster. Like at the end of the day, that's like the most important thing it can do. And a lot of that came from our conversation with Bill Gates and thinking about not just quantitative productivity, but qualitative productivity.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because I think that the conversation still is 80% or 70% about productivity right now, right? AI. And I'm wondering, I may have this right, not right, but you talk about that we're kind of in this middle era. And I'm wondering, if we're in a middle era, what came before and what comes after this middle era?
Honestly, in the book, I remember I even titled by the way, shout out to my co-founder and co-author, Andy Sack, who was every bit as responsible for the book as I was, of course, and has been my partner in so many ways. We titled one of the chapters, and we talked about this book being the middle era. I think what we meant, if I'm remembering correctly, in that chapter, and also I would just answer it in general, to be honest with you, is that it had to do with the fact that this is such a fast-moving technology, and everything until now has been about getting this technology to even sort of work, these breakthroughs, to where Bill Gates could say, wow, this is incredible. It can ace the biology exam, and it can do so many general purpose things. And yet it's not able to completely do what humans do in every possible way. It's not fully autonomously agentic in a trusted way yet, for example. We have not achieved artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, whatever your definition of those things are. And yet it's clearly seeming to be going in that direction. And so we're in this middle era where people are still like getting their arms and their head around the fact that this is happening and how does it impact them. But yet they've got to sort of figure out how to kind of ride the wave so that they don't miss it. And so I think that's the essence of what you meant by the middle era, which is like, it's kind of a painful era, to be honest with you right now, because it's, from a strategic perspective, you need to understand that if you don't start to work with this technology and adopt it and infuse it into what you do and everything that you do as a company, you're likely going to be competitively disadvantaged. However, it's not easy to incorporate it right now. It's not easy to get your arms around it. It still makes mistakes. There's still a lot of reasons why it's difficult to implement. And you got to be responsible about how you implement it. And yet you need to implement it. So that's a weird spot. And that's why I think we meant by the middle era. And I think what comes beyond here is every company will become, believe it or not, AI first or AI native, whatever you want to call it, eventually. It's as inevitable as saying every company is going to have a digital strategy or computer strategy on some level. I believe that in my heart of hearts, so I think that's what's coming next.
Maybe tell us a little bit by what you mean by AI first. When I first read the title, I thought, a company from scratch that's built AI first. But you lay out these different kind of pathways, that there's this top-down CEO, there's like the bottom-up, there's the middle out, there's AI first. So just characterize what you mean by AI first, because what I got from this was maybe there's a pathway to becoming AI first, but it doesn't mean that if you already exist, being AI first is already out of reach for you.
That's correct. Yeah, AI. So first of all, the title AI first comes from, and the term AI first comes from this long-standing sort of tradition in Silicon Valley of kind of naming these technology waves and the implications for business. You need to become, when the computer an internet wave came, it became important to become digital first. And they would call it digital first. Now, it doesn't mean that they were digital first literally. It meant, in that case, back in the 90s and early 2000s, what being a digital first company meant is you first and almost inherently think about your digital strategy in everything you're doing. You're asking yourself the question, can I, is there a digital asset to what I could be doing that could improve my customer relationships, my brand, my sales channels, how I treat my people, my processes? Then there became the mobile social cloud era. And that sort of took on the name mobile first, even though it just showed that I understand the impact of the mobile phone on consumer behavior, and that I'm gonna think about that, as a first principle in what I do. So now then we ask ourselves, what does it mean to be AI first? And you're asking now, what does it mean to be AI first? So first, keep in mind, in that same way, it's not being AI over human. In fact, one of the key lessons of the book is that AI first companies start with AI first leaders, and that it's all about the augmentation of the humans with the AI. And I really believe that's going to be the case for a very long time. Yes, AI will, in some cases, sooner than later, in some cases, replace humans in certain tasks. Right? You think about certain customer service tasks, or you think about certain data entry tasks and other things that if they haven't been automated yet, this is going to make it even faster to automate some of those tasks. But I really firmly believe this is about co-intelligence, to borrow a phrase from Ethan Mollick, and it's all about augmentation. And being an AI first company means understanding that applies across all of your functions.
Yeah, we could double click on that. You worked for Howard Schultz. You were a co-CEO at J.Crew. Talk to us about that leader, the AI first leader. You talk a little bit about kind of the traditional CEO character, and that maybe now we need a slightly different character. Who is that CEO of an AI forward organization?
Well, I don't think you need a different character. I mean, you might need a chief AI officer, but we can come back to that. In terms of the CEO, though, you don't need a different CEO to be an AI first CEO. Howard was a great example of somebody who's just amazing and an iconic leader. And he had an instinct that Starbucks should incorporate digital, and that Starbucks should become a digital first organization. He had that instinct. Howard's not a digital expert. He would never say himself that he was a digital expert in any way, shape, or form, but he had a nose for understanding that this or that technology would likely be very important to the essence of what in that case, the Starbucks brand was, which was about connecting with customers and having an emotional connection with customers, which is at the essence of the Starbucks brand proposition. So when he gets the credit for Starbucks being a digital first company, because he was the one that set the mandate, that had the instinct, and basically laid the groundwork to empower our teams to be able to go bring that to life. And I think that's very true in the AI first era, that to be an AI first CEO isn't to become an AI expert. It's to have your own aha moment, to have your own instinct that this technology, this alien intelligence, if you will, is so interesting and fast moving and pervasive that if you don't use it, you're going to be competitively disadvantaged. And similarly, the faster you can get on it, you could actually create an advantage for yourself. And if you have that instinct and then deliver a mandate to the company to get after it, you could sit back a little bit as a CEO after and by the way, you have to have your aha moment. It has to be authentic. You do need to sort of, if you're a CEO, get a boot camp from Forum 3 or something like that, so that, spend a few hours really understanding the power of this, but then go ask your team to go push it forward. And that's what an AI first CEO does. AI first CEOs, they don't need to become AI experts, but they need to enable that and facilitate it for their work.
So this leads to a question I've been dying to ask you. Let's just imagine it's 2009. You've joined Starbucks. You're leading Starbucks digital transformation. Eventually, 2015, you win the award of Chief Digital Officer of the Year. Huge success. Now, let's imagine that it's now 2009, and what would Howard Schultz's kind of directive to you be differently? What would you be doing differently? How would the outcome be different going instead of digital, going AI first?
Well, first of all, if we had GPT-5 and Gemini 2.5 Pro and VO3 and all this great stuff that's out there, and Claude Code, if all that existed and it was 2009. And right when beginning of 2009, I'm starting at Starbucks, and Starbucks doesn't have a mobile app, doesn't have a loyalty program, doesn't have mobile payment or mobile ordering or personalized marketing. What would I be saying differently? I mean, honestly, the first thing is AI doesn't replace the need of a really sound digital strategy. So if I could go back in time with knowing what I know now, I'd say, yeah, I should go back and talk to myself and Howard at the time. I'd say, stay on your path with your digital strategy, because that is core to the digital strategy is core to your business strategy. And without a proper execution of a digital strategy, it doesn't even, first of all, what the AI is going to tell you if you consult with the AI on just anything, it's going to be on strategic questions, for example, which is part of the benefit of being able to tap into AI. AI is going to be like, hey guys, get your digital strategy act together. So the interesting thing is they're different. One is could actually lead to the other. And by the way, I think it's a really good use of AI today. So I do think people need to be leaning on AI more for strategy advice, which is why McKinsey and BCG, they know that they're definitely leaning on it for advice to help supplement their advice they give to clients, which is very good advice. But it's very good at giving advice. So I would say if I could line those things up. Now, if I could line those things up, I definitely would be telling Starbucks as chief digital officer, hey, can I take AI under my purview? And they would have said, of course. And I say, great, we're going to have an AI council, and we're going to have an AI use policy, and we're going to have an AI roadmap. And it would be different than what I was doing, because one thing to keep in mind, the difference between AI and just a digital strategy is AI is a completely general purpose technology, and it impacts every aspect of your workflow as a business and as an enterprise. It also can impact your customer interactions. You see what I'm saying? Whereas your digital strategy
the digital is more visible to the end user.
It is, and it's more core. It's more core to your channel strategy and your customer engagement strategy. Like, it's not to say that digital doesn't impact your internal workflows. Of course it does. Like, everybody's got a computer on their desk and using the internet, and there's ERP, there's digitization of workflows and all that great stuff that's come up in the last 20 years. But it's AI actually takes that to another level, and it's different than your digital strategy, which tends to be meant as more of your customer engagement, channel, marketing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, kind of the mental framework of the work plan, if you will, kind of starts with the interface with the customer and then works backward. Whereas I guess the mental model for AI doesn't have that as the starting point. Maybe it doesn't have a starting point.
It's right. Or an ending point. It's like saying, that'd be like asking, where do I apply people?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me, because I love that you have this metaphor of thinking of it as electricity or a nervous system, as a utility. And there are other metaphors. So I think that, like, the metaphor that by which we understand new technology informs how we think to use it. You talked about the metaphor that Steve Jobs saw when the computer was being, that it was like a bicycle for the brain. So these different metaphors. So one good question, is there a metaphor that you hear people use that is not really helpful? And why is the metaphors that you describe, electricity, nervous system, utility, why is that more helpful?
Well, a couple of thoughts on that. One is that I think what's not helpful, but is understandable, is to immediately ask, what's the ROI on me using AI? Because for starters, that is the problem with that. And then we talked about this in our book, in our Moderna discussion with Bryce Chalamel, who's amazing head of AI at Moderna, is that because Gen AI is so general purpose and improving so quickly, both, that it is tantamount to asking, what's the ROI of people? What's the ROI of computers? What's the ROI of electricity? Like, you'd say, well, I don't know. It depends on what you're doing with it, right? If you're able to get the most out of people, then it's high ROI. And if they're not doing a good job, then it's pretty low ROI. So, but however, if you talk about software, deterministic software, and tech, traditionally there's a direct ROI. It's like, hey, I'm going to invest $2 million developing some app or something. This is going back 10 years. Like, I'm going to spend $2 million developing some application or some software application that I'm going to deploy into my business, whether it's customer facing, internal facing, supply chain, doesn't matter. I'm going to do that. And if I'm going to spend $2 million, like, what's my return? And like, pretty much you're typically going to go to some like, capital committee. If you're at a big enough company, you're going to be like, look, this is what our planned return on this, et cetera, is. And you talk about it that way and you think about it that way. You generally don't talk about computers, people, electricity in those terms. Those tend to be more foundational capabilities that you're going to put on some initiative, and you're going to talk about that initiative having an ROI. But you're not like thinking
are we
about
going to use people for this initiative?
Yeah, that's why. So that's why I feel like the analogy of traditional software ROI is going to get people stuck and into underthinking. And it's not that it doesn't apply. Don't get me wrong. Like, if you want to create some, advanced voice mode customer support bot that can both do voice and text and can like increase speed, accuracy, and customer satisfaction with your customer support, or do that same thing with advanced voice mode, drive-through ordering, etc. You can calculate like how much human capital you're able to sort of redeploy somewhere else, and et cetera, and figure out an ROI on the effort you're going to put into the pilot to do those things. It's not that you can't, but it's missing the point. The point is, this is like having the ability, like I said at the beginning of this talk, the ability to make better decisions faster, compounded across every functional leader of your organization, including the ability to innovate better and the ability to deploy best practices at those functional areas. That's the question you should be asking. Like, what is that worth to you? And I don't even know how you calculate it. Like, I don't even know if everybody in your organization could take a limitless bill from the Bradley Cooper, and suddenly just be smarter and faster and more capable on everything they're doing. I don't know how
do you model that?
Yeah, you basically say, I don't know. But like, now there have been studies done. Harvard, Ethan Mollick, again, who's amazing, and we talked to for our concluding chapter.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast as well.
Just in general, he's somebody who I really admire his thinking in this area, and he led a study with Harvard Business School and Boston Consulting Group. We wrote about this in that chapter involving Bill Gates, that using ChatGPT 4, by the way, that basically said, which is now a model that's not nearly as good as the current frontier models, and they took a group of 750 Boston Consulting Group consultants, and they spread them into a randomized 2 control groups. One group had to use ChatGPT 4. One group was not allowed to use ChatGPT 4. Then double blind graded their ability to make a number of knowledge work decisions across marketing, planning, analytics, budgeting, you name it. And it was a clear break. You could see it was a 25% faster, more productive, and 40% higher quality decisions. Like, and I'm telling you right now, if you knew that you could get an organization to, for the most part, be making 40% better decisions, 25% faster, like you will, give that a year, and all of a sudden you're going to be like, why are we doing so much better? Because what happens is that trickles down to, think about it for a second. Like, I've had CEOs ask me, how is this going to help me sell more widgets? And I'm like, well, how do you sell more widgets now? Better marketing, right? Better supply chain. We don't have stock outs. Like, the ability to dynamically optimize pricing in a way that's going to be customer satisfying, but also drive your business. Like, all those things are going to drive growth and customer satisfaction, both at a lower cost rate, which is everything you want. That comes from making better decisions faster, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I just read that, Starbucks is just before our call, implementing or partnering with something, some kind of AI enabled inventory system that just allows it to better predict. What do you say to people? So I guess a lot of our listeners, they see the power, they see the potential, and they appreciate the option value that comes from stepping into it and using it and leading with it. But they're around people who are asking for the ROI. They're around people who are saying, oh, is it really that? Is it hype? They're around people who are like, oh, it's risky. Oh, it costs a lot of money. I get that a lot, right? It costs a lot of money. What are your, not for you as an expert AI, but for you as an expert who is able to open up skeptics to considering the possibility of, what are some of your go-to arguments or phrases, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, you're putting your finger right on the most common tension point at the enterprise level. Is that, is it secure? Is it worth it to spend energy and money on deploying these AI practices throughout the organization? It still makes mistakes. Is it, all these questions? For me, the number one thing we've learned is that it's really hard for a company. The first thing I say is, I hope I'm talking to the CEO when I'm answering this question, because until the CEO gets it, and by the way, I don't normally talk about, you need a CEO for this or CEO for that. It feels like it's almost cliche. I actually think when you talk about a transformation at this level, I do think it has to come from the CEO. And like I said, the CEO can delegate it, in fact, should delegate it to other people to go implement. But if the CEO doesn't have the aha moment of that, Howard had it on digital in general, but like we see it all the time. When the CEO has the aha moment, the only question is, how far and fast should we go and when, not whether or not we should get on this. Because it's impossible you can have all those questions about, does it make mistakes, and is it secure, and is it worth the money? And until the first time you throw, a bunch of your data at it that is incredibly complex and unstructured and all over the place, and you see a thinking model in less than 10 minutes do a week or two's worth of work in 10 minutes and come up with the answers that your team probably wouldn't have come up with. And then you're like, or the CEO throws the board deck that they used last time to the board into it, and again, in a secure way. And then ask it, like, what questions do you think the board's going to ask me when it sees this? And they can basically test it because they did this for the last board meeting, and they see that the AI came up with all the questions that the board did ask them about, maybe some even better ones, and realizes, like, I've never had a prep partner like this before. At that moment, the CEO goes, yeah, I better stop asking about specific ROI and just start asking why we're not using this tomorrow. Like, it doesn't take like a super person CEO to like have that aha moment and then be skeptical. They usually are not going to be at that point, but you can't, it's hard for me I can explain all the Harvard Business School studies and, I can nerd out on all the technology all I want until they are actually seeing it and feeling it themselves. It's going to be hard to convince them. But then once you convince them, they need to clear the path for the organization.
Yeah, we're biosocial, emotional beings, and that's sort of how we develop our conviction. So maybe just take us to conclude, just describe this bridge for us. We're in this middle phase. The longer term phase is AGI. What's the bridge in between? What do you see as the bridge in between? Is it agentic? What does that look like?
It's funny. First of all, I'm glad you brought the middle point up again, because really we're at the
very early middle, right?
Yeah. And in fact, if you follow, a lot of people are talking today about the Gartner hype cycle and hype cycles. And many people would say, and I think accurately so, probably, that like we're, if the hype cycle's real, then we're probably getting towards a hype peak, and then there's going to be a trough of disillusionment and all that. I actually think that's probably true. And we are early in that cycle before we haven't hit the trough of disillusionment yet or whatever. So I'm glad you brought that up. I do, though, think that this technology is moving so fast, and we have not even begun to get the most out of it. And you got to understand that like even if we stopped developing this technology, meaning I'm not developing this technology, even if the labs, these frontier labs that are working on this stop today, there would be not only years and years of catch up of society and enterprises to being able to like take advantage of the technology that exists today. But secondly, even if it stopped today, you could start to create, you mentioned agents, like you could start to develop tools and data around the technology today that would continue. It would almost be like, it's almost like the object would continue in motion. Like you would feel like the technology is getting smarter because we would be able to wrap tool automation agents and other things around the current technology that would feel like it's getting smarter. Kind of like, by the way, these frontier models were able to do with their reasoning models that they came up with about a year ago, not even a year ago, last fall. So maybe just, less than a year ago, these models started to become smarter because they can think about your question and do what's called, and run like longer compute as well against that. And they will come up with better answers because they're sort of thinking to themselves. And so in a similar way, we as a society and in business could start to develop tools and agents and data sets that are specific to our companies and our jobs that would make it seem like it's getting smarter and smarter and smarter. And that's if the technology stopped today. And we're nowhere close to the technology stopping today. Like there's like a race. There's this China AI race, which Eric Schmidt talks about really intelligently, which is kind of scary. And you've heard about the 2027, paper and all that stuff about where they're like predicting that because of the race between AI, US AI and China AI, like that's going to only accelerate. We're clearly in a current state of accelerationism that's happening from a government policy perspective, but also from a Silicon Valley perspective. So for all those reasons, there's a race for AGI, there's a race for AI. This is just going to get smarter and smarter and stuff. And I know some people are skeptical of that. And it's not, by the way, an all good thing that this is happening this fast. There's a lot of downsides for a number of reasons, environmental potentially, but also just like societal and geopolitical. There's fraud, there's mental health issues that are cropping up. There's a bunch of ethical issues that have cropped up in terms of how these models were trained and built and created. So I don't say this like as I'm trying to add to the hype. I'm just saying that it's happening. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down. And so when I say when I answer your question, you have to understand that like there might be a trough of disillusionment, there might be societal backlash and all that kind of stuff, but this is going to be something that we're all going to have to figure out how to live with.
Yeah. No, I love that about the point. I love that about the point of your book, and kind of the takeaway of the book is, hey, you're describing a point in time and you are not predicting a clear path to where it's going, but you're giving us kind of the foundational tools to think about and to be part of the creation of what is going to happen. And I think that we really just have the choice. Are we going to be spectators, or are we going to be, in the stadium, so to speak? So thank you. I know there's so many more questions, so many things we could cover. We're going to encourage people to buy your book, to read your book that you co-authored. Again, you have a lot of great content, tons of podcasts. I've learned a lot from those as well. How else can people connect with you and continue to learn from you?
Yeah, thanks. So our book is available anywhere books are sold, generally online. AI First is the title of the book. Definitely come to Forum 3, FORUM number 3.com. And you can learn all about everything that we're doing as a company and more about kind of our thoughts on the topic.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and doing all this work. I mean, interviewing these people and bringing it all together in something that we can all kind of get our hands around is really a gift to all of us. Thank you for being here as well. Thanks, Adam.
I'm glad you found it helpful. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you to our guest, Adam Brotman. Thank you to our executive producer, Zach Nest, our editor, James Pierce, and the rest of the team. If you like what you heard, please follow, download, and subscribe. I'm your host, Kyan Krippendorf. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time with another episode of Outthinkers.